that, I am very happy to hand things over and welcome Skip Dye, who is our Senior Vice President of Sales Operations and Library Sales at Penguin Random House, and he is also the chair of PRH's Intellectual Freedom Taskforce. Skip, I'm going to pass things off to you to kick us off and introduce our other panelists that we have joining us today.
Great, and I'm going right now to start getting ready to share my screen. Hold on 1 second, please. Share. Share. It's a screen, stupid. Do my share impersonation. We're going to get started. So I hope you can see my screen correctly on stuff. The stuff as we get started today, but hello and how are you? Good morning. Thank you for joining us. As Beth said, I'm Skip Dye, and along with my colleagues Meg and Alyssa, we'll be walking through where we are today on book bans, what we're seeing across the country, and critically how publishers can respond in a coordinated and effective way. This is a very rapidly evolving landscape, and our goal here is to give you both a clear-eyed view of the challenges and the practical strategies that we have for action. So I want to update you a bit on the activities of our task force. As Beth said, at Penguin Random House, our position has been unequivocal on this topic. We believe in freedom, the freedom to be read and the freedom to read. That includes engaging with ideas that may be unfamiliar and even uncomfortable for people. As Nihar has said, exposure to different viewpoints is not a threat, it's essential. The principle underpins everything we're going to be discussing today. So before we get into the specifics, I want to frame our focus a bit. We're approaching this issue, as our strategy is around 4 main fronts: coordinated messaging, raising awareness, creator support, and legal and legislative action. This isn't a single-laned effort. It requires alignment across the entire publishing ecosystem we have at PRH. But we'll go through and talk about it. And again, if you have questions along the way, I'll pause at the end and you can ask me any questions you'd like. So, as I said, one of the most important developments has been the creation of a coordinated industry-wide approach. We've built a working partnership that includes multiple publishers and key intellectual freedom organizations. This level of our coordination is essential to scale this impact. Together, we've developed shared messaging, visual assets, and best practices so that when we speak publicly, we're all aligned and reinforcing each other than having a fragmented message. The Right to Read Working Group is an informal group of cohorts that meet monthly. Now, if you would like to learn more about how to be a part of this working group, I want to ask you all to just reach out to me, email me directly at skip@sdye@prh.com. Most of you know how to find me, so please do, and I'm happy to get you engaged. Now, this work extends much more beyond publishers, as you know. An example is, of course, the book resume project, which we'll be talking about in the next session, so there's more detail there. We're working actively coordinating with a broad alliance of stakeholders here: national organizations, local advocacy groups, educators, and librarians. The goal is to share data, strategies, and resources so efforts are not duplicated and gaps are minimized. The book resume project does just this. It is a tool to help books stay on the shelf when they are in the reconsideration process. So as we said, more in the session to come. Also, a key part of the strategy is making action accessible to all. So last October during Banned Books Week, as some of you saw, we relaunched our Bandwagon Tour, which you'll see the pictures here. Our goal with the Bandwagon is to raise awareness for awareness of the impact for librarians, teachers, authors, booksellers, parents, students on just how book bans are harmful. And we help them understand what's happening and how they can take action in their own communities, which is what we're trying to do, make it community focused. Through the Bandwagon Initiative, over the past couple of years, we've donated over 25,000 books. We've reached more than 4.4 billion impressions and made over 15 stops nationwide at both large and small towns. This is about meeting communities where they are and ensuring access to books in places where that access is being challenged. The bandwagon week, the banned books week, during that time, we also held our Save Our Story supper. We felt it was important to ground this in what people are doing on the front lines and how they're experiencing book bans. The gathering was at DC's MLK Library. Plaintiffs in various legal actions across the nations, authors and illustrators, and various partners in the fight against book bans all gathered to share their stories, share a meal, and share experiences. There's one common misconception that book bans drive sales, but that's simply not true, as we all know. As Melinda Lowe points out, bans silent voices and limit access. Authors like Ibram Kendi and also Jason Reynolds reminded us that books are vehicles for personal transformation, and restricting them has real consequences. Efforts like our Save Our Stories and related events build on this momentum. They create a sense of visibility, of community engagement, and also serve as a platform for storytelling around the importance of access. These initiatives all work together to translate awareness into advocacy. On the legal front, we've taken an increasing active role. As you guys know, here's just a sampling of the listing of some of our actions. PRH is involved in multiple cases, either as plaintiffs or in supporting roles across many states, including Florida, Iowa, Texas, Georgia, California, and Idaho. These cases are not isolated. They are part of actually our broader national strategy to challenge unconstitutional restrictions and defend the First Amendment rights. We are also collaborating with partners like AAP, ALA, PEN, and other publishers to all strengthen these efforts. Slide. Finally, our legislative strategy focuses on three pillars: advocating for strong pro-access laws, partnering with allies to educate policymakers, and supporting grassroots groups and efforts at the local level. This includes both defending against harmful legislation and proactively advancing policies that protect the freedom to read. The key takeaway here is that this is a multi-front effort: legal, legislative, and community-based, and all three need to work in tandem together. What you see on the screen now is our legislative successes from the 2025 legislative season sessions. We're now in process, working now in 8 states to try to get laws passed. Hopefully that will come to the forefront. We'll talk about some of those states later on, but I think you'll see here that one of our big efforts this time is actually working a lot on killing bad bills, and I'll talk about some of that coming up. So try to give you where we stand, the bad and the ugly bills that are out there, speaking of. Let's get started with the current legislative landscape, and frankly, this is where things become most concerning. At both the federal and state level, we're seeing a wave of legislation that goes beyond isolated challenges and starts to systematically reshape how books are being accessed in schools and libraries. At the federal level, proposals like HR 7661, which you may have heard of already, are broadly framing LGBTQ and trans issues as being content that's sexually oriented, which opens up the door to sweeping preemptive censorship nationwide. They're doing this by cutting funding in the educational code. At state level, the pattern is even more pronounced and more aggressive. What we're seeing are bills that remove local control from librarians and educators, introduce criminal penalties tied to vague definitions of obscenity, allow government bodies to directly intervene with library operations, and in some cases, attempt to shift responsibility onto the publishers themselves. States like Florida, Idaho, Georgia, and Arizona are leading examples of this trend, with legislation that lowers the threshold for removing books and then bypasses longstanding legal standards. The cumulative impact here is very significant. What we're looking at is the erosion of professional autonomy in libraryships, a chilling effect on collection development, silent censorship being flames being fanned, and a broader culture of risk aversion where the safest choice becomes not offering certain books at all. So this is no longer just about individual challenges, as we've seen in the past, as you've heard me say. It's about structural pressure on the entire system that supports access to reading. Where do we stand the good bills? The good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess we go. Now, the picture is not entirely one-sided, and it's important that to note that there is meaningful progress happening, particularly where advocacy efforts have been coordinated and sustained, which we'll be talking about. At the federal level, we're seeing legislation like the Right to Read Act and the Fight Banned Books Act, which aims to do two critical things. One, provide resources and legal support to school districts defending access and reinforce the principle that book access is a protected right, not a discretionary one. We're also seeing continued support for institutions through measures like the reauthorizations of the Museum and Library Services Act. At the state level, there are strong examples of what effective advocacy can achieve. In places like Alaska and Massachusetts, we're seeing proactive freedom to read legislation that strengthens protections and even allows authors to directly challenge book bans. I'm sorry. Now, these bills offer both what we call sword and shield protections for educators, librarians, readers, and also authors. In Virginia, legislation was just passed that reinforces the need for clear and protective collection policies. We're just hoping that the governor signs that into law. And just as important, in states like Wyoming, harmful bills have been successfully defeated, preserving both young adult access and librarian protections. So, what's our takeaway here? Advocacy works, but it has to be early, coordinated, and persistent. With stakeholders, publishers like us, librarians, educators, and community groups and readers all align and act quickly, we can not only slow harmful legislation, but in some cases, as we're seeing in Massachusetts, which we'll be talking about it, some cases it stops, with some cases it may even bring the conversation forward and we have good bills passed. So at this point, I am going to pause because I've gone through a lot of stuff in a short amount of time because I wanted to save this for the good stuff, as I call it, next. But does anybody have any questions that they would like me to address?
I do not see any questions coming in the chat just yet, Skip, but I will keep an eye.
Thank you. And again, I'll be sharing this presentation with you, and I do have my notes of what I've been saying, so at least you can go back and read and see where I flubbed up, if that makes any sense. Next, so I want to bring in Meg and Alyssa. Come on in. Hey, friends, the water's fine. Now, when you look at both sides of this, the bad and ugly bills, as we just did, and the progress we're seeing with good ones, a clear pattern emerges. Where harmful legislation is advancing, it's often happening in the absence of coordinated resistance. And where we're seeing meaningful process is because a broad, diverse coalition are coming together early and staying engaged. And that is what's happening in the glorious state of Massachusetts, my new home state. As I say, every state's becoming a home state to me at late, isn't it, ladies? The Mass Freedom to Read Coalition brings together citizens, authors, publishers, local businesses, local publishers, and advocacy organizations. They're all aligned in protecting access and passing proactive legislation. And that's the work that really brings to life the point I just made about advocacy works when it is a collective, strategic, and sustained effort. My friends, I would love to talk to you about your experiences, about how the coalition came together and what you're seeing, because I know you two are very active members of this coalition. So why don't you first just talk about your first impressions? But I want to talk first about this logo, et cetera, and the stuff, which has become a center point, a call actually in the state. Does anybody want to comment about that process or what that logo has meant for you guys?
Yeah, I think we both. Go ahead.
We can both chime in. I mean, Massachusetts, we are patriots, and I think, that stands for something here, that, we protect freedoms, and that includes the freedom to read. So I think, the logo of using the patriot, is really, central to, the identity of Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think we're really proud of our history in Massachusetts. I think you'll hear us talk a lot about being the birthplace of democracy, the birthplace of public libraries, public schools, all of those things, being really champions of the written word and the First Amendment. So for us to be able to then say we should also protect the freedom to read with the logo, really got us hitting the ground running. I think one of the other things we should also mention about the logo, Skip, and thanks for bringing it up to start, is it's really a byproduct of all of the pieces of the coalition, right? This is by a Massachusetts illustrator that was known by one of the coalition members. So it really truly was designed, created, and then produced by a Massachusetts business and Massachusetts citizen.
Yeah, I think that the key point to all of this is keeping it purely Massachusetts, because I think that is a power. In dealing with the coalition, can you talk about how you both got started in this? I know I'm part of the blame, but besides that, how did it get started for you? And you've each taken different roles. So do you want to talk about some of the roles you're playing? And I just want to say we do have other client publishers who are also involved in this as well. We, of course, Holiday House, and we have, of course, Candlewick, and we have some people who are not clients of ours, like, for instance, Nosy Crow, who also are very involved. So why don't you guys talk about that, how you got started in this and that pieces?
Yeah, I think, we did, truth be told, Skip, get an email from you that said, hey, are you aware that this is happening in your backyard and that you do not have a law in the state of Massachusetts to protect not only the freedom to read, but also any kind of literacy professionals, teachers, librarians, authors, publishers, by the way, when book banning does happen. And we're going to introduce you to some other local friends, and it really is beneficial when it's local businesses that are involved. Charlesbridge is a children's publisher, so it's a really unique role for us too. When we came to the table, we were really keen on kind of listening to how the educators and the librarians that work in the kids space are being affected in this and how we could help. So from the Charlesbridge team, we've been doing a lot of kind of the publicity outreach, working with kind of our own resources, our own networks of both local and national press that would be interested in what's going on in the State House. And also we all had a lot of authors that were part of Massachusetts' branch of Authors Against Book Banning. Just one other acronym, people are keeping track on how we haze with the alphabet, AABB. So we were also banding together to ban book bans that way.
Yeah, how did I come to be in it and other staff? I've been working in the librarian and bookseller space for quite some time, and an email was sent around asking us to take part in the Cloak Coalition. It came together really quickly on our end. Beacon, we're mostly nonfiction, adult publisher, but we're mission oriented, and we had been it's after Winter Institute a couple years ago when booksellers, had been saying, where are the publishers? Where are they? Why aren't they speaking up? When the book bans really started to pick up steam, and so we came back from that and started putting together resources and talking about, book bans more and just having, something, even it was physical, not just online that we can bring around. So that the book banning, part for us, as an organization started a couple of years before the coalition because the concern was growing. So that's where I'd say we came in from this.
Yeah, I want to just to reference one thing you brought up was about your resources. Full disclosure, and I try to give you always credit, but one of the resource documents for sharing is one that sprang from pull forth from your early efforts in putting together resources. So I've been using it and adding to it, and I know other people have. So thank you for that. And we're going to share it again with the clients because it's been updated. So that's a document we'll be sharing as we go through with this stuff. Was there anything that you guys have you had this experience before? Have you ever been involved in some kind of effort similar to this?
Not like this. I think we've all been involved in the book banning conversation and kind of pulling together resources for our own independent publisher or author needs, but nothing like this.
Yeah, not since I was an intern an environmental organization in DC in the late 90s, have I done something like this. But this is way more intense, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so do you mind to just talk about a couple of things that you are actually doing through all of this piece? Like, what are you actually doing in the coalition besides just those efforts? Are you talking to your legislators, or what all are you putting together?
Yeah, I think, it was very good because I had, Alyssa, to your point, what do I know about kind of this kind of very forward thinking, step into the state house, talk to your local legislator, wearing all of your hats about what we're going to do to change the law, right? We're not doing reading here. Somebody's going to have to educate me just a little bit. And when you take a step back and you think about what we were doing as a publisher to protect our books, to protect the right to read, to protect our readers, to protect our authors, there were a lot of things that we actually could bring to the coalition on a very, I don't want to say basic, but a simple level. We helped design and create and print postcards. We then were able to collate kind of materials that were being able to be used by multiple people and multiple players. On a really basic level, we were housing things and making sure that there was a way to get these postcards out across the state of Massachusetts. There were conversation points that we were helping kind of contribute to, things that we talked to librarians and authors about how to fight book banning, that we were then able to bring into the coalition meetings to say, this is what we've seen, these are the lines that are working for us, these are the points we need to focus on.
Yeah, one of the things as a publisher that, we do have to bring to it is like, I'm going to the Public Library Association conference next week where, I can be not just, we have our own flyer featuring Beacon banned books, to start the conversation, but we can have postcards there for any Massachusetts librarians that come by, or we could talk to others about, the coalitions that are in other states. And so those sorts of conferences, the educator conferences too, and bookseller conferences, we're a lot, it gives us a way to help spread the awareness even farther than what the coalition is able to do. I'll say, like, there's different sort of levels of the coalition. So there's the steering committee, and initially we were meeting for an hour every week just to talk through next steps and what we hope to achieve. Now we're at every other week. There's sort of the supporters who might have postcards out at their organization, or have an event, or speak about the coalition, help get the word out. Then there's just sort of the general public that we hope are sharing sharing the awareness with everybody. My role, I think, has been sort of being in the meetings, contributing, talking out at, the various events, that we have. But, there was, one of the authors driving around Massachusetts, dropping off postcards, everywhere, and then picking them up. We had, authors, like during Banned Books Week, having, all sorts of coordinated events, for this. So there's a lot of, there are people submitting op-eds or, other pieces to local newspapers. So, I mean, there are so many moving parts. to this coalition.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I'm trying to encourage people to understand that from this, getting involved is at so many different levels. It's sort of the, as I always call it, it's that advocacy ladder. It's like getting on the first step of the ladder, right? As you climb up to getting much more engaged on stuff. As long as you come and approach the ladder and you take that first step, that may be enough for you, and that's all you need to do. But I think for both of you, I think you both took that first step, but then realized there was so much more that needed to be done, and that you both stood up and really spoke out about this stuff. And so many members of the coalition have all done the same because it has been such a coordinated effort. Was there anything that surprised you about the coalition? Anything that surprised you about this process?
I mean, I'll speak to just because it's Massachusetts and, how we're, how people think of us, as the birthplace of democracy, people think it can't happen here. And it's just, Massachusetts Bay Colony, founded by the Puritans, who, were really intolerant of, what they saw as social and political excesses. Fast forward to the 1800s, and, after the passage of the Comstock Act, Boston City officials are on like a banning spree, with the help of the Watch and Ward Society. And censorship, in Boston was, really, really widespread, up, through the 1950s. So it can happen here. And we have to be aware of that. And, this bill in Massachusetts was first introduced 3 legislative sessions ago, and it hasn't made it to vote. And, since that time, other states have passed their legislation. So it's time for us to catch up, I think is like a big thing that people have to realize.
Yeah, I truly think that too, Alyssa. I think most people were shocked that Massachusetts didn't already have this law or that this was happening in Massachusetts. I think when we're speaking about the coalition too, Skip, just the variety of organizations involved. I mean, we have the ACLU, we have the Massachusetts Library Association, Authors Against Book Banning. There were several publishers in there. There were more, PFLAG is part of this. All of these organizations that have a lot of background in advocacy and policy shifts. And then there are all of us that go, all right, we have this really great background on literacy and protecting the right to read, and just trying to figure out how that conversation was going to happen and how it wasn't going to be just this really like large cacophony of voices in a room and nothing getting done. And I think, Alyssa, you were a part of some of these initial meetings. There was a pause going, how the heck is this going to work? In the first couple of meetings, do we have a vision? Do we have a kind of have a priority list? Do we know what we're even kind of working towards? And I will say that the coalition was able, based on the history that Alyssa was just talking about, to say, listen, this is Massachusetts. We believe that everybody has the opportunity and the right to access books. How do we get there? And how do we protect those that are involved in that as part of this process? So I was surprised, Skip, at how quickly it came together and how the priorities also were being able to be talked about both as an organization and then in the actual bill language.
I mean, it helped that, we had professional people guiding us. And, you throw a bunch of publishers and authors together to talk about, passing a bill, and, we don't know what's going on, but, we have people who do this stuff to, help get us going on the right track.
Yeah, I mean, that's a key component, I think, to understand, because our involvement has been in this. We've been kind of off to the, I mean, PRH has been involved. We're very much engaged, but we really believe that the strength of the coalition in all the previous states, like we had a very strong one in Rhode Island who passed their bill on pieces, et cetera. What we see is that when it is local led, when those people who are to benefit by this law the most get involved, that's when things move very quickly. And we saw that's what was different this time, composed to, as you said, Alyssa, this was the 3rd time this bill has come up. The bill looks different than it did the first time. It's a much stronger bill. It offers protections, as I say, sword and shield protections for authors, which is unique. It's very similar to the Rhode Island bill, which is the gold standard. This will be another gold standard bill. There's other states who are looking to Massachusetts right now to see how you guys are getting this pushed through as well as you are on those pieces. So I do give a lot of tip of the hat to the coalition and what they're continuingly to do. We haven't got there yet. I'm not saying knock on wood, but we've gotten further faster than ever before. So that's a very positive thing. Is there anything that happened? Oh, I don't mean, were you going to say something, Meg? I'm sorry.
I was just too. I think one of the things that's really strong along with that, Skip, is one of the reasons that we kept hearing that the bill didn't pass the first and second times is because there was such a carve out. It was for librarians, it was for authors. There wasn't this kind of this is for everyone. And with the coalition right now, I think we're able to set, I think anyone we've spoken with has seen just the multiple layers of organizations, individuals that are protected as a result, and that helps strengthen it. It's not just one party's interests that are really being protected here.
Right, right. It's true. Was there anything that you think that has been, I would say, a challenge for you? Do you know what? I'm not going to say it's not worked. I won't use that. I'll say there's been a challenge, and that still is a challenge being part of the coalition.
I can think of two. And Alyssa, I have a feeling you're going to back me up on here. The first one is how much time you think you're going to devote versus how much time you're actually going to be involved. It's not, yes, there's now an hour-ish meeting every other week. It used to be every week. That's the start. And then you go back and do the actual kind of coalition work either you volunteered for or you're already helping with or what needs your attention. So it's a lot more time and a lot more staff time than I originally anticipated. And I think in a weird way, it's being able to constructively say, no, I don't think we should do that yet. I think when we're going to talk about the advocacy day the coalition had at the State House in the past couple of weeks, but I think just having to figure out logistics and say, that's a great idea, but we can only have X number of hours. That's a great idea. We can only bring X number of boxes in. And just being able to kind of see the forest and the trees and make those efforts go the furthest with the resources we have. That's been tough.
Yeah, time definitely. And I think other coalitions would probably benefit because we didn't sort this out until much farther in, like the different levels, like who's in the steering committee, what's the sort of that second level of, people who are helping out, what's that, just that public, awareness level. So I think it probably, would have helped more if, we had a better idea early on, like how it was going to be structured, because there were people coming in and suddenly everything's getting bigger. And, you have meetings with like 20 voices or however are in there. You got a lot of ideas, being thrown around, and sometimes it doesn't feel as productive, So, there's those things like that, all the same issues that we have, when we're dealing with, these types of meetings and trying to make something happen.
Well, I think I want to transition now to something you brought up, Meg, that and this is talk about make something happen. And this is related to just what you were talking about, and that's the Capitol Book Fair event that we had, which the coalition is still getting local press about. And I mean, press being both print, TV, and social has just been extraordinary. Do one of you want to talk about this, what this event was? And I've got some pictures on the screen now to show what we did and that pieces. Do you mind? One of you talk about that?
Talk about that for sure. So we had an advocacy day earlier this month, State House, and it was essentially a day of meetings with reps or their staff from coalition members all day, as well as a Capitol Book Fair, where we had many members of the coalition have a table and be there just like you would envision a book fair, open from the time the State House opened till when it closed for individuals to come in, talk to us about H 3594, which is our act regarding freedom of expression, and be able to talk about how this was affecting Massachusetts citizens, Massachusetts staffers, communities, local businesses, local residents, and anything in between. And by the way, your local readers.
Yeah, I meant I should have clarified. This is really focusing in on the House portion of the bill because we did get the Senate portion of the bill passed with three good amendments added to it that we wrote all together as a coalition that we wanted to have actively engaged and added to the bill, and we got the Senate to propose them and vote on them, and they all got through. This was basically now us trying to do a push on the House on that piece, on stuff. So, Lisa, do you have other comments about the day? I should have clarified that a bit.
Yeah, so I did the book fair portion, and I'd never done anything like this at the State House before. I had like one meeting there one time. We didn't even like think about like, oh yeah, the public can just walk in if if they wanted to. So we didn't know, who was going to be there. And I would say it was mostly legislators and their staff, and there were multiple other sort of groups there that were advocating for whatever they were there for too. So it was kind of busy in the State House that way. So every once in a while they would wander in. um Again, us being sort of the only adult publisher in a sort of a room full of mostly children's and YA books, is unique. And I had because Queer History of the United States, by Michael Bronsky, who is a Massachusetts author, and that book's been banned across the country in many places. A lot of gay legislators would see the book and were just so thrilled, and I'm just like, it's been banned, and please take it. And that it was that sort of thing. And just the number of staff who weren't aware of book bans in Massachusetts, I think was another part. So it was educating that staff to know that this is an issue.
So I think that talking about, and I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry if I interrupted you, Meg. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other piece of it too that I want to make sure we talk about, because this was a big deal, and it was also proof of when a coalition comes together with their resources and their strengths. Is we had a press conference that got really great statewide coverage. You see that on the large top photo here. That's Melinda Lowe, last night's Telegraph Club National Book Award winner, who is speaking at the podium there. But we also had Chewy Sutherland was there, so like there were some big heavy name authors that came out to support this that also happened to be Massachusetts residents. But also we had a lot of state senators, to your point, Skip, that came in to help us support the House bill at that particular juncture too, because we need both to pass.
Yeah, I think it was a great day because of the fact that you guys did this book fair, but also part of the day was actually a very coordinated effort of citizens from the coalition going to their representative, their House representative, and knocking on doors and walking in and saying, "Hi, vote for 3594." On stuff. Have either of you were you involved in that too, or did you were? Okay, good. How was that experience?
I was in those meetings, and I have to tell you, I was reticent to volunteer. The kind of sign up sheet went up in the coalition, right? We're going to have teams go visit House reps. We're going to talk to legislators. We're going to talk to their staff. That's great. I really know how to do the table. I'm going to be behind the Charlesbridge table. I know how to do that. It kind of circled back, and there was still an opportunity. And okay, I can go have a conversation, right? And what was really eye-opening is as someone who talks about book banning daily in her day-to-day work with Charlesbridge is just how few things most Massachusetts residents and Massachusetts representatives know about what happens book banning. Book banning is a national epidemic, right? We all know that. We all talk about that in this safe space that is publishers and this sentiment that this can't happen here in Massachusetts that came out of so many staffers, or it's not happening here from so many staffers, from so many legislators, was a little shocking and jarring. There was an article in the Boston Globe recently, I want to say within the last year, please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that cited 70 confirmed book bans And so we were touting that particular statistic. And when we would say in these meetings, that's 70 that we've confirmed that we know about. Book banning is not always reported. That's just, you want to talk about shadow banning, you want to talk about silent censorship, you want to talk about things that we don't know about yet. That floored most people, that there was a second layer to this conversation, that how this was directly impacting our businesses and the ability to publish.
And also, I think you talking about you were there as a citizen and a parent. You were there as a constituent, and that is actually very, very impactful on being able to do that.
Yeah, and I think in my very first meeting, it was a very kind of jarring. Well, I know you're here to advocate, for publishing nationally, and the comment I was able to say back, and a lot of my colleagues that were in these meetings, that's great, and yes, it is a national problem. But by the way, I'm a born and bred resident of Massachusetts. I've been here my whole life. I'm public school educated. I also happen to pay taxes in a city outside of Boston, and I have children in the public school system. So that's great, but let's talk about what's happening in my own backyard.
Yeah, it is very impactful. Very, very, very much so. I know we're getting some questions on stuff, etc. So I was going to pause here for some questions before. I know that we did get submitted a couple of questions that I do want to direct, but let's go to see, as I say, misengaged, or whatever. That's wrong. Is there any comments or questions that you want to bring up that we're seeing in the chats?
Yeah, I love that. Misengage. I'm gonna add that to, maybe our whole team will just add that to our business cards that we don't have. Yes, we have a few. I'll start with one from Ben Applegate, who just also wanted to comment that that PRH is a large publisher with a high national profile and, proud to be a part of a company that has the foresight and fortitude to do this kind of advocacy. Do you have any comments or advice for smaller and/or independent publishers who may be concerned that by taking book banners on directly, they may be bringing negative attention on themselves or their authors, where they may have been under the radar before?
Well, I think one of ladies, I'll pass that to you.
I mean, I guess this is where, a coalition comes in handy, and getting the support together. I mean, again, Beacon, we're a mission-driven organization, so this is sort of, natural for us to speak up about things, and I think other mission-driven organizations like us do speak up, and we don't really see any sort of negative impact to us. Our authors being banned, that's sort of a different animal. But I will say, the banning, it's not from, these movements are not from individuals. It's mostly these organizations and these, sort of put together movements on the opposite side that are pushing for bans. And that's why it's important for us to be in our own coalitions to be pushing back against that.
I think it's a really valuable and realistic question, right? Anytime, particularly in this conversation about book banning, that you put anything in the news, in the media, on social media in particular, you do run the risk of all of a sudden feeding a troll, right? Getting the attention that perhaps you are afraid of in this instance. I would say, as a smaller publisher, we absolutely talked about that. We are also mission driven, but also believe that there is a freedom of expression and the First Amendment. How do I put this politely? Challenge with book banning, and that we want to preserve every reader's constitutional rights. So I would say, if you're looking to get involved, to start locally and to know what your local bill or your local legislature is missing. For us, it was a lot of these protections. I love that sword and shield, by the way, Skip. I hadn't heard that before, and I'm totally going to steal it. And kind of know what your educators and your librarians and your allies in literacy are already facing and help support that. I would also know what your own authors are facing too, and kind of where their own personal comfort is. We talk about that a lot in-house. When we do have a book that's challenged or banned, the first conversation we always have with the author is, what would you like to do here? We are going to advocate for this title to be accessible, but how would you like your own persona to be involved? Do you want to be named? Do you not want to be named? Do you want to get on social media and talk about it? Would you prefer to have kind of a behind the scenes opportunity? All of these are reasonable and viable. You just kind of want to know your own comfort.
Good, good. Should we go to the next question?
Yeah, we have a question. Capital Book Fair is an amazing idea. How did you arrange to hold this book fair at the State House? Who did you have to coordinate with? Where did you get permission? How do we do this in other state houses?
So great question. Great question. I will answer it, and ladies, please correct me when I say stuff wrong, as I do. But how it was coordinated is that these are public spaces, folks. You can walk in the door anytime, because if you're a citizen of that state, or as I say, as the citizen of the United States, and you can have whichever capital you're going to, either the capital with an A or capital with an O, you can walk in the door. Organizing the space and looking at it, you do have to coordinate with there's in the offices. Well, the legislators helped us. We talked to the sponsors of the bill in Massachusetts. We wanted to do an event in the State House. There are rooms for us to use. We had to see what rooms were available. Then we then booked it, and that's how we did it. I mean, it is getting in stuff, as Meg knows. Getting materials up for this thing was not an easy task to do, but they did it, and it was a benefit for us on the stuff. So it did take some, as I call it, Massachusetts know-how and wit to make it all happen, which they perseverance helped. But other states, we've been doing the same thing. So just so you know, we've worked with coalitions to sponsor similar events in other states, in Arizona, in Nevada, in Texas, in New York, in Rhode Island, Virginia, and Michigan. We've done similar events like this. And so with those coalitions and pieces, and each one is about the same thing about how to get them booked. But I hope that answers the question.
Skip, that reminds me too, we always talk about what makes the coalition a success. And one of the things is, what can you bring to the table? And asking the really basic questions, like if anybody in your organization or at your publisher plans an event or plans an exhibit, and being able to ask, can I ship in boxes, or can I have access to a loading dock? That was one of those moments where people, yeah, we are going to have to get stuff into the State House. Can I drive my personal vehicle up with tote bags and books? Or do I have to get somebody to walk me through the back door? All of these logistical questions were something I don't think we had thought about as a coalition, but we knew firsthand as publishers how to get books in buildings.
Yeah, so I think that's the whole idea of as I say, the wit and perseverance. Each one of them have different standards on pieces. In the state of New York, when we did it, everybody took basically a box and went through the security line. That was the best way to do it. And so you see this basically a mirage, a whole like cascade of people with boxes and bags of buttons as we go walking in and stuff. So that was fun. Do you want to go to the next question?
Yes, I think we have one more so far. Is there some kind of directory so those of us in other states can get involved?
So there is not a directory that is out there saying, oh, where's the coalition? But once again, like I said, I'm happy to share with you the states where I know there's coalitions getting involved. But one way to do is to reach out to local organizations to find out if there's coalitions that are getting involved. A lot of them are organizational based. Some of them are, I would say, grassroots advocacy based and stuff in the States. But that's basically how I say it, is to look locally to see what's here. I think that is a good way to go about that stuff. And like I said, I'll share with everyone the states. And I think somebody just shared a link in the chat too, which is also probably helpful. Next question. All right. Then if there's not any, I'll just go back to some of the questions that was asked, which is kind of like the second one there we kind of talked about, but we'll talk about this a little bit more. Let's talk about, we got some questions about how do we handle author appearance issues. And this is, I know we've been seeing it on the PRH side. I know the clients, you've been seeing it too on your side. We've had a mirage of things happening where we've had either authors have had events scheduled and then they've been canceled, or we've had authors who they say, please don't talk about certain books at your event. Please don't bring up a certain title at our event and those pieces. But since Meg and Lisa, you guys are more involved in that piece, do you want to talk a little bit about some things you've seen?
On my end, I've because of, some of the content of our books and some of our authors, there's definitely calls to bookstores, to cancel events, and events have been canceled if, a bookstore doesn't think, they can keep people safe. And it affects things. We've had threats. One of our authors, threat at the Cambridge Public Library. Again, you think, hey, Cambridge, this is like, liberal oasis. But somebody, called in a threat about one of our authors, and, they kept the event going. But just had police presence there, which was interesting. So, it's more, I think it's sort of the librarians and the booksellers, that are bearing the brunt of, these threats, when we have authors coming in and having to deal with, like, do we keep the event going, or, do we need to cancel?
Yeah, I think it's very ever present with security when we're talking about appearances too. For us as a children's publisher, the extra layer is that there are often children present. So security or safety becomes a whole nother issue. Going back to can this or can this not happen in Massachusetts, if you want to hear some of kind of the real stats, when we had a public policy day for advocating for this bill on the Senate floor, we had several librarians speak out about quote unquote bad actors showing up at children's story times in ski masks, or really having their own personal information as a children's librarian put out on kind of on the internet, so that their families were now affected because a book from a single entity or a single individual or group was really being challenged. I think the first question always, and I talked about this a little bit already, is to talk to your author who's involved and see how they would like to proceed. We have authors that are very, I don't want my name mentioned. I have kids in the school. I have to totally get it. But we have authors that are like, absolutely. These are the 5 local reporters I'm talking to. How can you amplify this for me? That's great. We take our lead there. I think the other piece of it too is if depending on where the author appearance is happening, we actually have this happen a lot for us in school districts. We just had one in Texas with Chris Barton. You should Google it. It's fascinating. We actually were able to come together with, and by we, Chris in particular, came together with a local bookstore that helped salvage that event and said, you know what, if you can't go into the school, we're going to host you. And we got the word out that way. So I think knowing your network too, and knowing what their own kind of opportunities and willingness to be a participant to either host this author or kind of promote this title that's being banned or challenged is really helpful, and to be able to pivot accordingly.
And I forgot to mention higher education too. I mean, it's happening everywhere. We had an author who was banned and her event was canceled in Texas because she's we did a book on 3rd trimester abortion, and these on and off campus pro-life groups pressured them to cancel it. But then there's like PEN America, released PEN America has been a great advocate, in this, and they released a statement, about that. So there are also ways to get, the literary organizations involved when something like this happens, to sort of spread the word and, get support.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point too, just in terms of like, we keep talking about how the coalition has strength in numbers. Know your allies, know that PEN America has resources, know that ALA has resources, know that your local, that the ABA has kind of a playbook here too. Like being able to reach out to your fellow community and seeing who can help and who can help promote and protect is a really good strategy too.
Yeah, and thank you both for this. And of course, I'm always there. And Rosie, as I said, we get involved. Many publishers that are not related to us know that they can reach out to either of us for advice or connections and support. And we've helped and shared either resources, shared some letters of concern that I've written to school boards so they know what it is and how it is, et cetera. So we can definitely share that. I know that we are getting close to how we time and how can I get more involved. So I'm going to very briefly touch on that and say there's a couple of organizations I spoke about already, or groups, I should say. It's not organizations. One's just a group. They're not an official organization. That's the Right to Read Working Group. And if you're a publisher and like to get involved and know more about it, then please email me, and I'm happy to get you connected where that's concerned. There's another organization that started off as an offshoot of Authors Against Book Bans, which is called Publishing Professionals Against Book Bans. They have a website. Both, just so you know, that organization, PPABB, the acronyms, that their information about that group is in the resource document that we have, so you can actually see how to join. And actually, in that resource document, it tells you a bunch of different organizations. It shows you how you can join as well, those organizations. So there's a lot of information about how you to get involved. But I think it's something we said earlier, I think it was you, Meg, if not Lisa, but it was the whole idea of know what's happening locally. That's why I say look first. Know about your school board. Know when your school board is being elected. Know who's running for our election. Know about your library. Know about, is your library, do they have a board of trustees? If they do, are they appointed or are they elected? Do they have a library board? Is there a board of commissioners that create library policies? All their meetings are posted.